Hello and welcome to Come Home America. My name is Nick Hankoff, and this is Come Home America. It's not Slob's room, but that's the sign I have right now. I'm building out this studio, so you'll just have to bear with me. The audio's over here, the video's over here. It's a little discombobulated, but I'm putting the show on because it's Sunday and I'm wearing a suit, so I thought, let's go for it, right? Now, Come Home America has a couple episodes out already, thanks to my lovely producer, my wife, Alice. And you should go check those out. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, BitChute, and just look up Come Home America, Nick Hankoff. And you'll see that I've already interviewed Scott Horton, Michael Bolden. So some hot interviews out there. Go take a look at those. But I haven't really had a real true introductory episode, I don't think. You get a hint at what I'm aiming at with this podcast with some of those interviews. But, as long as I record on Sundays, I'll look this good. But I'm going to try and just record whenever I get a chance. You might hear some background noise. It's kind of a busy house. So when I get a chance, I'll come on here and record. And I will try to do that as often as I can. And again, just bear with me as the show comes together. And a big thank you, by the way, to my wife, Alice, for letting me do this, try and get it started, try and make it productive, both for me and for the audience. And my audience, I am going to try and aim to please everyone without diluting my message. I do want to at least give something that people understand is outside of the mainstream. So you're going to agree or disagree. And we're just going to go for it. But I do want to reach a sort of a mainstream audience, if that's possible. There are so many podcasts out there, but what's one more, right? And I think we have just a slightly different take on the news here than some of those others. And the more the merrier, I think, especially as the times get crazier and crazier. Every minute there's an update that seems to affect people's lives, people's money, their civil rights, their family relations, the country as a whole. So what's it going to hurt to have one more podcast? And that is this one. So Come Home America, you'll see as the show goes on, that title really suggests that America is out to lunch. America is just gone inside out, upside down, and it's just a crazy world right now. But we used to be something. We're trying to figure out what we are, what we will be in the future. And there's a big war going on for that, and that's not an overused term anymore. There really is a culture war going on for the identity of America, for what it means to be an American. And it's been so watered down that it's just become meaningless, and we're in this meaning crisis now, and people are seeking meaning in extremism. And this show will cover the political extremes, but in order to get out of that in a healthy way, we're also going to be covering some other interesting topics as well outside of politics. But it is an over-politicized time that we live in, so a lot of things will be inextractable from their tangible relation to politics. So that's going to be the show. I want to promote some things, and if I just name them right now or label them right now, it might oversimplify it or falsely promise something if your meaning of it is different from mine. But suffice to say, reflecting from my own experience and what I can offer to the discussion, I want to promote family. I want to promote traditional community, and I want to promote freedom. And that's going to sound maybe conflicting to some folks, but I do hope to make it a coherent message throughout these episodes. But so what we have this week, the number one story, is domestic terrorism. And half of the audience knows what I'm talking about, and the other half of the audience is mistaken, because what's been labeled domestic terrorism this week was a shooting at a Black Lives Matter riot in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And this had been going on for at least a couple of days in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old man with either I believe like an AK-47 style rifle. It could have been something else, but a long rifle, semi-automatic, what ignorant people call an assault rifle. He was carrying that along with with many others at a car lot that was being targeted and attacked by these so-called protesters. And there are many details. I don't have to play it all out because a lot of you have probably looked into it, or you can look into it for yourselves. But suffice to say, Kyle Rittenhouse was chased and attacked by people who wanted to go on rioting without the worry of somebody armed stopping them. And so you see in video, Kyle Rittenhouse. The news story is, if you don't know, he shot 3 people. 2 of them died, and the other one, I believe, is paralyzed. But the first shot was in the head of a man named Rosenbaum, and Rosenbaum had been chasing after Kyle, throwing something at him, what many people, including myself, thought was a Molotov cocktail because there's a flash in the video. But it turns out that could have been a light reflecting off a plastic bag. And what I've heard is that in the plastic bag was a brick. And it does look like, how do you throw a plastic bag? There was something in the plastic bag that was a clear projectile. And so clearly, there are plenty of bricks around there. You can see in video the destruction of cars and car lots that Kyle Rittenhouse was trying to protect. Police had, at one point during this timeline, encouraged Kyle to stay away from that car lot. And when he was out on his own, that's when he was chased down. And there are more details I can get into this if we really need to go through the timeline of this. But for now, just to say that there are murder 1 charges against Kyle, and this all seems to be really overcharged. And I don't know what it is about overcharging and then ultimately dropping a case or letting someone off. But that seems to be a form of, to me, it seems to be a political move by the DA's office or whoever happens to be bringing those charges, where they get to appear as if they're doing everything they can to appease the mob, appease those who want to scapegoat this whoever the particular defendant at the time is, overcharge, and that way it looks like you're really fighting hard, that you're on the side of the mob, but knowing full well that the case is failed from the beginning. And so, therefore, what happens, you can always, blame the system, that the whole system let this person off, rather than them being innocent in the first place. And that's what it appears Kyle Rittenhouse is. And yet you have folks calling him a domestic terrorist, or, we have these other terms, right? The left wing calls the right fascist, neo-Nazi, white supremacist, etc. And the right doesn't have as good a terms for the left, maybe, unless this is catching on. But now pedophile is being thrown around a lot. So if you're called a racist, a terrorist, a neo-Nazi, you're supposed to reply that somehow this person is a pedophile. And maybe the chances will be in your favor that person is one, right? So among other terms, communist doesn't have the same sticking point. And that's curious, isn't it? But so pedophile is the go-to term for the right wing attacking the left. So we have these dehumanizing terms, of course, but domestic terrorist, when that gets thrown around, really this has a more legalistic consequence that comes along with it. And there was, for a long time, a lot of, I would say, apprehension towards using this term domestic terrorist. Going back, I think it was brought up by the left first. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me put it this way. We remember domestic terrorist being associated with the war on terror. If you were against the Iraq war or against the troops or against the wars, then some of you were unpatriotic and were probably a domestic terrorist, or at least a terrorist sympathizer that quickly became domestic terrorist. But the left really latched onto the domestic terrorist narrative during the Tea Party years. And, of course, now you see how peaceful those Tea Party protests were. And here in these Black Lives Matter protests, even before, I would say it's even ramped up more recently, even before that, within a short period of time, you had dozens of people killed at these rallies or within some proximity to the rallies or connection to the issues surrounding the rallies. People are dying over this. And so these violent demonstrations, these riots, these whatever, they're now being host to actual real domestic terrorism, and that's why I bring up this recent history of the politically charged nature of the term domestic terrorist, because we know that there are actual consequences for being labeled that. President Trump said he was going to label Antifa as a domestic terrorist group, and that has not come to pass, even though I think Trump said that probably months ago at this point. But, some on the right would say for a time, do not label even Antifa domestic terrorists. Do not label Black Lives Matter domestic terrorists. Even though there might be a reasonable argument for doing so, don't do that, because strategically it's bad. All that will happen is if you call them a domestic terrorist, someone they like will get into power, and it'll be that much easier for them to label you a domestic terrorist. And this is strategic talk. But when we get down to the actual facts of the case, what are we going to call this or call that? The Kyle Rittenhouse case, they're calling domestic terrorism. It's clearly not. But we now have another case that is just days after the Kyle Rittenhouse event, that now we have a Trump supporter, a cop supporter, a Patriot Prayer group member, or at least attendee to their rally. This right-wing group under Patriot Prayer, Blue Lives Matter, Trump, this whole coalition of people on the right coming together in Portland, Oregon, to demonstrate. And maybe a larger lesson here is that this is not a good idea to get into these messes. Stay home. And that gets to the other theme of the show, really, is to build instead of destroy. And nothing to suggest that the right wing was destroying or really causing any violence in their demonstration in Portland, but just to say that it's not constructive either, that it turned out that this demonstration cost someone their life, and only one person is responsible for that person's life, the gunman, who apparently has been identified. But there is the argument to be made that you shouldn't put yourself in that situation, and I think that should be the lesson. We hope, not just for this, not just out of this event in Portland, but in Kenosha as well, right? Kyle, thank God, made it out alive, but he's being charged, and who knows what ultimately will happen to him, and whether or not it was worth it in the end to be there in that moment. The long-term consequences, we don't know right now, but it seems as if now, no one's mind is being changed, right? I don't think. I think people's minds are being changed by other people's violence, and that is pushing people to Trump more so than say, like, wow, that hero out there really stood his ground. And I don't think people are really convinced by anyone going into the street. So this latest event in Portland, Oregon, just last night, so this is Saturday night, August 29th, we have this man apparently on video maybe walking out of a parking garage, but you see a man walking right next to a parking garage, and then there's a man either on a skateboard, I believe it's a skateboard, not a bike, so like a skateboard, and you see another man walk up and shoot his gun at the first man walking out. And the man who died turned out to be wearing gear on him that associated him with the groups, the right-wing coalition groups that were rallying that day. But what you hear in the audio of this video is something to the effect of like, oh, here's one. Oh, we found a couple of them. It was being reported that someone had said, we got a Trumper over here, but I think it was, we got a couple over here. So I think they saw a couple people who were right-wing oriented that they could clearly identify that way. And then you hear what you would assume to be the gunman sort of confirm, and then two shots are fired out, and these men disappear into the streets, and you're left with a dead man in the street. And there's no sign at all of any self-defense activity. You hear, one man on wheels. This is like what you can take away from the video as best you can, but it seems as if one man on wheels is saying, there he is, and another man with a gun comes from another angle and fires off. So a coordinated assassination on a peaceful person just for a political identity. And then there's video being shared now. And by the way, soon I'll be able to post these up here, do all fancy things, put them on my screen, but just want to get this out, a little bit of commentary while the news is hot. And you see other video of folks from the Antifa, Black Lives Matter side cheering on the death of the man before he's even, really positively identified, or that, much news. As the news is still breaking, details are coming out, there are rallies, crowds of people cheering the death of this man, calling him a neo-Nazi, fascist, all the usual tropes. So these two examples, Kenosha versus Portland, you can clearly see a difference in the outrage reaction, the righteous indignation of people online. All of those who jumped on Kyle Rittenhouse, a man who actually turned himself over to police as soon as he realized that he killed someone, called 911, began walking towards the police. Compare that to someone, who cowardly guns someone down and then runs away in a coordinated attack. It's really disheartening, because it means that a war is really on, and some people are falling for the other side, the side that is the aggressor in this war. And so you have folks on social media coming out against Kyle Rittenhouse. Twitter itself, I think Twitter and or Facebook themselves were censoring the hashtag Kyle Rittenhouse, because news was coming out that proved that this was self-defense, and they couldn't have this. So they said it was too graphic, or it went against their safety guidelines, their community guidelines, whatever it is. So they're censoring the news on Kyle Rittenhouse. And now with this news, I don't think they'll be able to easily censor it as much, because it's out over the weekend, and it's not as clear as day as the Kyle Rittenhouse story was, where we had the names and the people in so much video. And this one, it is getting out there though. So what we see is that just as the extremism is in the streets, to a certain extent, it's also comfortably in our homes and on social media. And what I mean by that is that you have people who, well, actually, some of them would probably go out to the protests, go into the streets. But you have some who just, it's not in their nature to do that, but they feel emboldened all the same to sit on their couch or here in their basement and go online and really flame war people, if that's still a term, but really, try and go after people online for simply having the wrong interpretation of an event. And that's the thing about this Kyle Rittenhouse thing. My initial attitude was like, why are you going there? They're going to be destroying this property. If the police aren't going to take charge, if the National Guard isn't going to take charge, it's a travesty, but really it doesn't mean that you should necessarily take charge. And it's a calculation, right? But for me, I wouldn't recommend anyone do that. Certainly no one would recommend I would do it unless they wanted me dead. I can't go out there, but vigilante style. But my point is that my attitude toward the Kyle Rittenhouse thing was kind of nuanced, okay? And even I could understand, even though I thought it was clearly self-defense based on the video and analysis of the video that I saw, even from the New York Times, it didn't shock me that people have a different response to this. I mean, emotions are high, and they have different understandings of what it means to hold a firearm and whether or not you're defending yourself or not. It's like someone just holding a gun is always the aggressor in some people's minds. Whatever, like people online will jump to conclusions and get the wrong answer. And it's okay to correct them or argue, on the issues, but it's never about that anymore. A few years ago, you would see these headlines everywhere, especially on YouTube, but you could see it kind of all over the web when there was some sort of argument or something. It was so-and-so destroys so-and-so, okay? So-and-so demolishes so-and-so, or crushes, or whatever, right? Like it was over the top to get you to click on it. You knew watching it, you weren't actually going to see someone crushed, demolished, or destroyed. And yet those headlines would be pretty accurate today, wouldn't they? If they were just describing Facebook comment threads or Twitter tweet threads, because that's the point that we're at right now. Like if you believe that Kyle Rittenhouse defended himself, you are, you guessed it, a neo-Nazi, fascist, white supremacist. If you believe that Kyle Rittenhouse, was a murderer, you might just be a pedophile, right? I mean, that's how low things are going now. And this to me shows that it's really inevitable. Like there's the only end to this is civil war ish. I mean, it's really like, the most like sporadic, like you'd have to like break the Civil War up into millions of pieces, and then it just looks like little scrimmages everywhere. But that's, it's not the North versus the South anymore. It's just every other person against every other person, it would seem, in some areas. But if not that, and I hope it's not that, that's what the show's about. It's about separation. It's about decentralization, especially of political power, making the political powers closer to home. Hopefully more neighborly solutions can come about when, the political authority in charge is answerable to those who are in the disagreement. But for now, we're having a soft civil war to elect a president. It looks more and more like Donald Trump is going to win the presidency, but I guarantee you these riots and, just strife in the streets is not going to slow down. They're not going to say, oh, well, that didn't work to elect Biden. I mean, this is the same stuff was going on in 2016, and it's only ramped up. And so this will continue through the November election, all through Trump's second term. God willing, he enjoy a second term, much less a first, right? But so why are we at this point? Like, what happened specifically? Is there any one trigger pull that, forgive the pun there, but is there any one moment that set all this off? And I don't know. I'm going to be searching out that answer with you on this show. But I do think we understand the overall story, the overall narrative. And that is that we have a meaning crisis. We have a sense of atomization. There's no mediation anymore between the individual and society. And society really even has just become the state at this point. There's almost no society left. It's all the state and the individual's relationship with the state. And it's an exclusive relationship. The individual doesn't have a real relationship with other intermediaries, such as, family, church, even, some labor union or any sort of community association. They're all just redirecting that individual toward the state, telling the individual how to relate to the state. And so that's what this show will be really, really looking at as well, is can we rebuild these mediating groups and institutions, and how would that happen? So yeah, I should mention, even the last signs of these intermediary groups existing, they're getting attacked in these online flame wars. You have people, calling into other people's jobs, threatening to get them fired from their job, okay? Leave them all alone, just totally deserted as far as employment goes. And then you have folks, calling up family members, saying like, "Oh, I'm sure your parents would like to see this," or whatever. So attacking the family, attacking a person's work, attacking any sort of mediating institution, maybe some hobby the person likes, or some, you could see that how this happens on the personal level, but it's happening across the country at rampant rates. Like it's happened to me, but so people are not satisfied with just taking out the person anymore. And really, it's more intelligent than that, to go after the person's associations. You understand? So a lot of libertarians, and this is sort of the worldview I come from, is libertarianism originally. Libertarianism is quite different today than how it looked when I really got involved. I'm like almost scared to say half my lifespan ago. That's a long time, but it's changed a lot over that time, which really is a short time. But now libertarianism has gone way too far toward just the strictly individualist sense, where it actually does venture into libertinism, because there's no center of meaning for the individual. The individual is freewheeling and has no attachments, certainly no obligations. And so any attachment that he does have is, it's really just a fluke. It's a fling kind of thing. And so what we need to really understand is that the state, that which has the monopoly on violence in the society, the legalized monopoly on violence, that taxation is theft, that arrest without proper warrant is just kidnapping, right? And all the rest that they get away with, they give special names to themselves that if we did it, we would end up in jail because it's actually against the law. So the state that's allowed to do everything that's illegal and legalize it just for themselves, it used to be thought, I think widely taken for granted, that, it's the state versus the individual, and the state just wants to crush individuals. We're seeing now that in a revolutionary time, as one mob looks to gain control of the state, it's really doing what the state's been doing all along, maybe to some heightened degree, and that is attack the associations, attack the intermediary groups, attack the communities, attack the institutions. And by doing that, you break down the roots of individuality in the first place, because a state really needs individuals. You understand, a tyrant requires many, many individuals, because a state and a tyrant are so destructive and so unproductive, utterly. They can't produce anything. All they can do is steal and destroy, that they require as many individuals as possible to do their bidding, to create a world for them to enjoy, to leech off of them. And so whatever degree they can do that to make it work for the time being, they will, even if it's a short term. And so they require individuals to do this work for them. So it's not necessarily, to think about it in terms of the state versus the individual, individual qua individual. It's the state versus those sources of individuality, where our individuality comes from. It doesn't come from us. It comes from those who came before us. It comes from those we are attached to, where we gather our meaning from, and that is formative institutions. That might have to be for another episode. I don't want this one to be too long, but we need to think really hard about why would an institution exist? Does an institution exist to take advantage of its individual members, or is it supposed to serve its individual members? And there's corruption across every institution in society today. Of course, the state being the most corrupt of them all, but we have every intermediary institution basically corrupt, except for some beautiful families in this country and some communities as well. And so we need to look at those, and we need to look at how to build the future from those instances of real fountainheads of individuality that can create a prosperous society that will be more free and less state-controlled and state-dependent. And that is Come Home America. That's the country that was founded, and that's what we're trying to get back to. It's never going to be what it was in the past, but it needs to be the next great thing, right? So we have Make America Great Again from Trump, and that's ringing true to some people. There's some truth in that saying, maybe not exactly what's being done in its name, but maybe some of what's being done in its name. But that there's a reason why that phrase is catching on, and so that was taken. But now we have Come Home America, right? An older presidential campaign slogan, which before that was a line from a Martin Luther King speech. So in case you don't know where Come Home America comes from. But we look forward to having you here back for the next episode. I will I'll try and cover more topics than just this sort of back and forth on the riot stuff. Obviously, we have COVID, we have immigration, we have a lot of interesting subjects that get to the heart of what it means to be an American, what the identity of America in relation to the world is. So we'll be covering foreign policy as well, but then also maybe some entrepreneurship, some family, some community type things to try and get away from the political side as much as we can. Because that is very needed, even in a presidential election year, right? So God bless you. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been one of the first episodes. We'll call it episode number 3, the first episode. Come Home America with Nick Hankoff. God bless you. Thanks a lot for watching.